This is the first for me. Two guests at the same time. Aaron Hurst has spent his career building movements that connect people from the pro bono service market with Taproot to purpose-driven workplace with Imperative. Charlotte Massey is one of those rare founders who's comfortable both leading a civic movement as she's inventing in outdoor gear. She's the force behind the Seattle's part of Chamber of Connection and co-founder of Gnare Apparel, which Forbes called one of the most innovative outdoor brands out there.
If I could wave my magic wand and just immediately have everyone who is looking for those first round of connections have them, that's where I would start.
I think we see from the research that physical contact is critical. I think the level of situational humor, shared experience, the things you build a friendship on are harder to do online. If you need sugar now, you just Amazon Prime it and it's there in an hour. You don't need to go next door and ask for it. There's that lack of dependence on others that technology is taking care of that we know from the research, from our own experience, that asking for help and being vulnerable with neighbors is actually how you build that bond.
My garden is in the planting strip between the road and the sidewalk, and so whenever I'm out there, people will walk by and say hi and comment on my tomatoes, and then I'll ask their name and what house they're in, and it allows me to build connections. If you ask for help, it opens the door that they can ask you for help back. And so you're really creating an opportunity for mutual support.
This is the number one problem in our country. Many of my friends have midlife epiphany just around friends are really the thing that's going to matter. And if I don't invest more time in it, we all know where that story ends.
Now we're really close friends, but it didn't just happen. It took planning and follow through.
If you could convey one message to everyone in Seattle who's kind of feeling lonely but doesn't feel the courage to just go out there and start meeting new people.
That it's normal to be lonely in the way that our society is set up. It's not your fault, but also you can take personal action and change your circumstances.
I think one of the things people in Seattle don't do enough is...
Hello everyone. This is the first for me. Two guests at the same time, and not just any guests. Aaron Hurst has spent his career building movements that connect people in ways that most of us don't even realize we're missing. From the pro bono service market with Taproot to purpose-driven workplace with Imperative. Charlotte Massey is one of those rare founders who's comfortable both leading a civic movement as she's inventing in outdoor gear. She's the force behind the Seattle's part of Chamber of Connection and co-founder of Gnare Apparel, which Forbes called one of the most innovative outdoor brands out there. And together, they're here to talk about how you actually build trust and connection in the city. Thing we all of us know about after COVID, and maybe even try to solve it for a country. Hi guys.
Great to be here. Excited for the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
If I gave you both a magic wand and said you could fix one thing about how people connect with each other in Seattle, what's the first thing that you would change?
Go for it, Charlotte.
Well, if I have magic wand powers, I do think I would still tackle one of the issues that we are working on with the Seattle Chamber of Connection, which is creating an onboarding process for when people have first moved to the city. I experienced moving to Seattle in 2021 during the pandemic and had a really hard time figuring out how to break in. I found Seattle to be an extremely welcoming place once you have made enough connections that you can be introduced to their connections, but until you get to that point, it's very challenging. So if I could wave my magic wand and just immediately have everyone who is looking for those first round of connections have them, that's where I would start.
And for Yarn?
Very on message, Charlotte. Well done. But the magic wand, though, opens up a whole new set of possibilities because it doesn't have to be realistic. But I think education and kids would be a big part of it. I think we're not really training our kids to think about connection the right way. A lot of our school system really prioritizes a sort of fixed mindset career mentality and a certain set of skills and talks about success that way, when we know the research shows almost all of our happiness and well-being is tied to relationships, but that's not really the story that we hear. We hear the story of what's going to pay. And I think it really sets our kids up for a very unfortunate and often rude awakening at midlife when they realize that they just haven't been on the right track. So if we could somehow wave a wand and have kids really build the skills, but also have when they're graduating and they're at their graduation, it's not like, what are you going to be when you grow up? It's like, what relationships do you want to have? What kind of communities do you want to be a part of? If we could make that shift as a narrative, like that, to me, would do a tremendous amount. And I'd have to do some kind of magic one. I don't know exactly what bug it would create, but it would create some bug in smartphones that would like prevent them from being used so much.
Day zero scenario.
Yes, or maybe it's like you can't have more than one screen in a room at one time, or I don't know. There's some kind of magical mischief.
And looking back at our childhoods, we've grown up probably like just like you, spending a lot of time playing on the streets with our friends, just getting lost in the city, doing crazy stuff. And when you look at kids today, they spend most of their time in their gadgets and like studying online, console linear computers, but socializing online as well, playing games online with each other. And when we see this kind of shift towards a more remote way of socializing, do you think that's not really solving the problem of connection, and these people are still going to miss that personal connection when they grow up?
I think it's better than nothing, but I think it is definitely not solving for the need. I think we see from the research that like physical contact is critical. I think the level of like situational humor, shared experience, the things you build a friendship on are harder to do online. And I think a lot of the forms of connection require being sort of in person, knowing your neighbors, being involved in service. These things generally don't happen online. In contact with someone on next door is not the same as actually knowing your neighbors. So I think I don't want to like just say it's completely worthless or all evil, because I think that's overstating it. And there is research that shows that some of that, is healthy and works. I think the bigger challenge is that it's all run by corporations who fundamentally have their business models tied to keeping you on there. If companies had like a business model that somehow had it so that it minimized the amount of time that you were online or in those systems and pushed out, but that's never really going to be going to happen because it's not where the economic incentives are. So I think it's that corporate economic incentive structure that's actually creating the problem more than the technology itself.
What about you, Charlotte?
Yeah.
I definitely agree. I think that there is a real magic to being together in person and being able to create your own form of play that's not formally structured, and also the benefits of spending time outside in the sun, in the air, and getting movement. And it's more difficult to do that when you're always online. And then also we know the impacts of cyberbullying, and when you put that screen between people and you're not looking at them face to face, it's just a lot easier for hurtful things to be said and shared. And talking to the young people in my lives, they're all terrified of having some quirky, funny moment of themselves broadcasted on the internet and having it live there forever, which is not a fear that my friends experienced when we were posting on Facebook in middle school. And I'm scared for them too. That's something that people who are in their teens shouldn't have to be thinking about.
And Aaron mentioned the topic of neighbors. And I've noticed that as well in my life, that 10, 15 years ago, it was easier to become friends with your neighbors. Everyone seemed to be warmer, I think. And when you move to a new city now, it's almost as if everybody's in their problems, in their own world, and it's really hard to kind of break over that to them on a more personal level to connect. Is this something that you see in Seattle as well?
I'm reluctant to have like broad statements about it because I think there's a lot of exceptions. There's a lot of blocks in Seattle and elsewhere where like neighbors are just freaking awesome and there's tight communities. So I think there's like a wide range of experiences going on. I think some of the trends, which a lot of them are driven by like things that happened during COVID and just people's general fears that came out of that. I think we've seen that technology is taking care of a lot of the things we were reliant on neighbors for. I always give the example, like if you need sugar now, you just Amazon Prime it and it's there in an hour. Like you don't need to go next door and ask for it. Like there's that lack of dependence on others that technology is taking care of, that we know from the research, from our own experience, that asking for help and being vulnerable with neighbors is actually how you build that bond. And we don't really need that as much anymore. So I think that's led to it. Charlotte, I know, is a great neighbor because she's got an amazing garden.
Just invite everyone for the barbecue sessions. That's it. Friends for life.
I mean, that can be the start of it for sure. We've heard from lots of people who have hosted or participated in block parties that getting everyone together so that you can break that ice and meet and know each other's name can go a really long way in connecting a neighborhood. My experience with neighbors in Seattle has been very mixed. I've lived in two different neighborhoods, both times as a renter. And so the first time in 2 years, only met the neighbors right next to me and did not have a very pleasant experience with them. They were not excited to have neighbors next door who were renting in their duplex. And then moved to a new neighborhood where people were much more friendly and excited to connect. But it was definitely on me to go out and meet them. They weren't trying to bring me cookies, but that also makes sense. It's a lot of effort to get to know your neighbors, especially if they might not be there for a very long time. So I think finding ways to put yourself out there. My garden is one of the ways that I do because my garden is in the planting strip between the road and the sidewalk. And so whenever I'm out there, people will walk by and say hi and comment on my tomatoes. And then I'll ask their name and what house they're in. And it allows me to build connections that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. But there's lots of different ways to do that. A lot of people say walking their dog is how they meet their neighbors. And then just trying to remember the people's names in addition to the dog's names so that you can connect, or asking for help. So even if you can Amazon Prime your sugar, you can still go next door and ask if anyone has extra, or invent some other need that you might have. Even if you could do it yourself, if you ask for help, it opens the door that they can ask you for help back. And so you're really creating an opportunity for mutual support, not just trying to mooch on someone if you're asking for support.
So with Chamber of Connection, your main ACP is people who have cats, basically. People without dogs.
I don't know. In Seattle, I see people walking their cats fairly often too. So I think that might be an even bigger conversation starter.
That shows the desperation in the community. People get jealous of all of the dogs facilitating connections. Like, my cats can do the same.
That may be one motivation.
And Aaron, how did the movement came to be from something as an idea and something you had in your head, and to something that you've actively decided to, let's tackle this, let's actually do something about it, let's look for other people to build this vision?
I mean, I've been working in and around this topic most of my career, so it's not like a brand new field of work. I think what really stood out to me were two things. I think one was at a strategic level, just really seeing that this is the number one problem in our country. But at the same time, seeing there really is a leadership gap at a systems level on this topic. For the number one issue to have no systems level leadership is very concerning. And as a social entrepreneur, it's also very exciting because it means you've got the biggest issue and there's like a gap at the top of like where the need is. And it's like, ooh, like that looks like a really fun social impact sandbox to play in. So that is a very compelling. I think the second piece is more or less on a personal level of, having moved 12 times, of about to become an empty nester, of just having worked way too much in my career. And like, especially as a CEO, like you don't generally make friends with the rest of the team in the same way as other folks do. So it's a very isolating role. I tend to become friends with other CEOs, but it's isolating. So I think you just sort of have this midlife, or at least I did. Many of my friends have like midlife epiphany just around like, like friends are really the thing that's going to matter. And if I don't invest more time in it, like we all know where that story ends. And realizing that as I talked to folks, it was rare I found someone who didn't have that same story.
Taking friendship professionally, basically, making sure you put the effort, you put it on your schedule. It's not just something that happens by itself.
Yeah, it's prioritizing it, and it's learning how to do it and recognizing it doesn't happen like organically. I think there's a lot of myths about connection in our society that really get in the way, including this sort of just belief in like this sort of friendship love at first sight model, where you're just going to bump into someone. It's just going to be smooth sailing from then on and no problems. That happens occasionally. Like Charlotte made one of her best friends on a ski lift. But generally, that is not the model for how friendship works. So I think really recognizing the amount of investment involved and making space for it, and also just initiating. I think a lot of people just wait for everyone else to initiate, and if you initiate, like you're well on your way.
Charlotte, and when did you realize that that's something that you want to invest a lot of your time and energy into?
I told you about my experience moving to Seattle during the pandemic, and I moved here for my then boyfriend. He's now my husband, so that investment worked out. But he had some friends here from college. I knew hardly anyone, and I was working remotely and living in an area that was not walkable. So I was not organically going to bump into anyone. I really had to actively put myself out there if I wanted to make connections and build friendships. And it was a uniquely challenging time to do so as well. There were not very many opportunities to be in person, especially during the winter in Seattle. And so I realized I was going to need to be very intentional and active around friendship. And I built a spreadsheet of friend leads and I treated it like a sales funnel. So I went down my list of people who I'd seen on TikTok or Instagram or who I had mutual connections with on LinkedIn or who I had been quoted in articles with, and I just reached out to all of them asking if they wanted to get coffee or do something active together. And I got a lot of people who just never responded. I got people who responded and then were really difficult to schedule with. But I also did have a lot of first friend dates, and having that approach of I'm going to start with a lot of people because that will allow me to narrow down to a few people who I can really spend a lot of time with, helped me feel okay with knowing that some of the friendships just weren't going to work. And it might just be that we were in different life phases. Like there were people who I met who I really connected with who were then pregnant or about to move out of the city and live in a big house in the suburbs. And so we just weren't going to be able to spend very much time together because it was not going to be convenient. And I was really looking for best friends, people who would want to hang out multiple times a week and do quite a few different activities together. And I was able to find those people, but it took a lot of activity. And for the friend who I bumped into on a chairlift, that happened because I got her number and then I texted her like 4 times asking her to do things before she finally came and did something with me. And now we're really close friends, but it didn't just happen. It took planning and follow through.
And both of you being entrepreneurs, when building something together, picking a partner is incredibly important step to do right. How did you know that you're right for each other building this?
I'll let Charlotte go first. I'm curious what she said.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm curious what you say. Well, I knew that I was really interested in this problem. I knew that I wanted to stay in the social connection space. And like Erin said, there weren't very many organizations actively tackling this issue at a large scale. So my options were looking to be either a community role at an organization that was larger where I could create connection for a small group of people, but not changing structures or making a larger scale impact, or starting something. And Erin is extremely experienced and smart, and I saw early how skilled he was at getting important people in a room together to make things happen just so much faster than it would be possible to do without those connections. And I also was coming out of a startup that I started in college with other students my age. And something that I had wanted in my next role was to be under a manager who I could learn a lot from. And so the opportunity to start something with someone with a lot more experience and connections who also I could learn from was an opportunity that I was not going to pass up.
Nice answer. Well done, Charlotte. Appreciate all of that. I think for me, like I when I start something, I get excited about it, and I just go and meet a lot of people, and sort of aware of different needs, but also just like looking for where there's like chemistry and there's like a clarity of like the 1 + 1 equaling 6,000. Um, and I think meeting Charlotte, like I think a couple things like were really clear. Like one is like Charlotte's just someone to get shit done. She's someone who like this work is authentically what she wants to do. It's not just like a smart idea. It's not just, this is what she's doing and like losing a lot of money in her personal life doing. So it's like there's clearly like a commitment to it. She's got entrepreneurial experience. A lot of folks who are interested in doing this work don't actually have that experience, that operating experience, which makes it really hard to actually get anything done. I think she and I share, despite being separated by decades, I think a lot of like weird like experiences as entrepreneurs growing up, and sort of how that manifests. So there was like to me a lot of similarity, but radically different sort of journeys around sort of those early stages that I could really relate to. And then I think the generational thing is really important because one of the things that was really clear to me is that in the work we're doing, primary population is at least 10, but more like 20 to 30 years younger than I am. And my insights into that population, my ability to be a spokesperson for that population, my network for that population, my understanding of the brands around that, are all things that um, I would have to spend a lot of time learning. And I don't think that's the way to do it. I think the way to do it is to be able to have a partner who really authentically breathes in that space, and can really lead that work and has good instincts in that area. And Charlotte has that in spades. So that's been, I think that was a really important part. Um, so those are, I think the key things that stood out to me, and I think they've all been very much proven true in our time working together. I look at what we've gotten done in Seattle. I think what we hear from everyone is like no one's seen an organization, for profit or nonprofit, who's gotten as much done as we have, and we've done it on a bootstrap budget. So clearly something's working.
And how they helped shape you into the person now getting shit done quickly, effectively.
Sure, I'm happy. Charlotte was the guinea pig last time. I'll go first to give her time. Um, I think I think there's a couple of things. One is just I have been working in this field for over this is 25 years now. Plus even before then, so working in Silicon Valley. So I just know a lot of people. So one of my strengths has always been like I just reach out to try to find people who can either do the work that needs to get done or have the answers that I need. Like I have no need to be the one with the answer or the one who has to do the work. So just being able to go out and just use network to get things done is something I feel like I've honed as a skill. Secondly, I through the Taproot Foundation, I really learned that the number one currency for good people is creating meaning for them. They value that above money unless they're in a very dire situation. And most of them really are starved for meaning in their lives. And the ability for them to be part of something bigger than themselves, the ability to do work that actually is like fulfilling for them, if you can frame it the right way, gets a lot of people really excited to be part of the team. And we've got over 150 volunteers working on this in Seattle alone, just because we understand that like doing service towards this actually makes people a lot happier, and it's a rare opportunity to be part of something that's doing something so important and as scaling and ambitious as we are. So I think we learned a lot about that. I've also been a product manager and I've run organizations. So like I understand all the functions of an organization. And I think that also just helps accelerate. And I can do all the functions of an organization at the basic level. So like that's not always the best strategy, but there's never like a roadblock in terms of moving forward. Because like I think Charlotte's very similar. Like we can fake it if we have to, good enough, whether it's an HR issue, a finance issue, a marketing issue, a tech issue, a sales issue. Like we can like come up with a good enough approach and do it with enough courage to get us to that next step. It's not the long-term answer, but it is what enables short-term traction.
What about you, Charlotte? Starting all the way back from selling artwork as a kid, didn't work in Ignara.
Yeah, well, one of the big learnings for me has been prototyping, so getting more confident putting something out there even when it's not ready. And especially when it's not fully developed, because that's how you get feedback and that's how you know what you need to change so that you can build better the next time. And we've definitely been doing that with Chamber of Connection programs, putting things out there and getting lots and lots of feedback and making rapid changes, which is often overwhelming, but it is effective at making sure that what we then scale is actually going to work. We've already tested all the bugs. In my earlier entrepreneurial endeavors, I had a tendency to be too committed to the product and be really precious about it. And I think also I'm now at a stage where I realize that probably no company or organization that I'm working on is going to be my whole identity or my whole career. And so if it's going to fail, I'd rather it fail quickly so that I know that it's not going to be what I spend the next decade working on and I can get on to the next thing. And that freedom from the desperation of needing something to work allows me to be more realistic about assessing where we're at and not try to force something to function in a way that it just isn't going to.
And what were some of the most surprising or unexpected challenges that you've encountered building Chamdorf Connection?
Yeah, I think a lot of the challenges have been expected, but trying to find the product market fit for programming is something that I wasn't expecting to be as big of a challenge as it has been. Our first program is our welcome day orientation for people who are new to the city, and we had a much higher proportion of non-newcomers attending than I was expecting. We had lots of people who were empty nesters or newly retired or who had lived in the city for a long time but didn't feel like they had the
Hey
connections that
guys,
they
what about
needed.
us?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody wanted our product, which is great, but we had designed it so that it would be a program for people who are new, and the curriculum really focuses on peer coaching and connections between people with similarities, and that similarity is just being a newcomer. It's open to everybody across all life stages and all backgrounds who are newcomers. And so it was really exciting to see that everyone was interested, but also it meant that we had not nailed our marketing or had not nailed the audience that we were trying to target. And so that really threw us into a space of wondering, do we need to change our product? Do we need to add additional products? Do we need to be on an application basis? And we've ended up adding additional products. So now we have a membership that's open to everyone and that is more focused on empowering people to be leaders in their communities around connection. We also found that there were a lot of people who wanted to volunteer who were at least partially motivated by also wanting access to the curriculum, but being able to get access in a way where they weren't needing to admit that they were isolated and lonely. There's a large stigma around that, which we're somewhat able to get around with the newcomer persona, because of course you need connection if you're new. That's no fault of your own. But if you're not new, why haven't you done this for yourself yet? And the reason is that we are not structurally set up to support people, and it's really challenging to make friends as an adult. And that's what our programming aims to support people in. But it's been interesting to see the ways that people want to approach solving this problem for themselves personally and for their communities, and it wasn't exactly what we expected.
I would put it in a macro level. I think that's all right. When I started working on this, the presidential election hadn't happened yet, and we sort of committed to it. The election had happened, and I think as an entrepreneur, like crisis is great. I think of it as like if a tree gets hit by lightning, it's like awesome. Look at all that wood I can use, and like I can build something, and it's going to be great. I think in this case we had a forest fire, which is like a very different kind of issue. And it's harder to know what to do. It's just completely charred earth in like every direction. And to sort of get oriented and identify like where is the opportunity in that to make an impact, and how to also not be dissuaded, like too discouraged from that. Because we saw companies all froze because they didn't know what to do. Foundations are all frozen. They're all trying to figure out, do we give all of our money to like these organizations that are having all their federal funding cut? There's just in every direction. Individual donors, like the stock market might completely collapse. Like I'm not going to donate money when I may not have any money next week. So everyone just kind of like froze. And I think I say this somewhat like retrospectively as a good story, but there's truth in it, which is I think to a large degree, like we just focused on programs and doing the work, because early on, I think doing work around fundraising and like some of those level of partnerships just wouldn't have gone anywhere. It was just everyone was frozen. So I think what we're seeing now as we're emerging this summer is that chaos is the new normal and people are adjusting to it. And we're starting to see companies and funders and others coming around and being ready to like talk. And we have evidence and we've shown what we've been able to get done at the same time. So it's been sort of semi-intentional, somewhat unintentionally, I think, effective in that way. So I think that was a surprise that we've been fortunate enough to adapt to some degree. The volunteer piece for sure. I think a lot of the surprise for me has really just been around like how hard it is marketing and getting to newcomers. I thought that was going to be a lot easier. I thought we could go to realtors and they would be a huge help and be able to get to it. I thought companies would just open the doors for like all their new employees and that universities would. I think the novelty of the concept, people didn't sort of fully sort of want to open the doors so they understood it. There's a lot of like risk and like risk aversion at every level of companies, universities, et cetera, to doing that. And the population of newcomers, I think like social media and other angles that we had, like I thought there would be much more like immediate virality to that would take off. And we've had to do a lot more like hand to hand, like on the ground combat to like bring folks in.
Seattle Bear.
The Seattle Bear, exactly. But that's been a wonderful surprise in the other direction, which is just how much media attention this has gotten. We like have had coverage in just about every outlet in Seattle. We've had national media interest. We've got partnerships with media companies where they're wanting regular content. So it's really become like a great content opportunity. I think it's one of the things we still haven't. We've partially been able to leverage. I think there's a lot more we could leverage because the story's great. It's a feel-good story. It's a story of the time. I think we've been really focused on other areas, but if we really were able to focus a lot more on content, whether it's social media, articles, TV, keynotes, like I think there's an infinite amount of content coverage because there's everyone wants to engage in this type of conversation.
Yeah. And what have you noticed with the implementation of AI into everyone's life? As we can see, a lot of people are trying to solve their main issue of loneliness with finding companionship with AI models, therapists, coaches, just somebody to talk to. And that kind of alleviates the need to have that other person for you to talk to. Do you think it affects how easy it is to get people to break out of their shell and actually go outside and meet real people for you?
No, I think for sure. I mean, there's some uses of AI that are productive in this area, but I think overwhelmingly it's not. We may see in the future things come out. I mean, the parallel I give is, I think what porn did to romantic relationships, AI is doing to platonic relationships, where a lot of that need is sort of can get met. I mean, what's better than a friend who like always agrees with you and always tells you how great your ideas are and like pushes you on different concepts and is always available, even when you wake up at 4 a.m. like I do. It's pretty hard to compete with that. So we've created this sort of perfectly imperfect friend in AI. And a lot of people like get frustrated with real people, and it's easy just to sort of retreat into that.
And it's almost like a muscle. Like you have to get used to, like it has to be okay with getting frustrated with other people a bit by bit, because there are other individuals, and that's okay. It doesn't mean it's a bad relationship.
And it's
but if you
interesting
don't practice it,
totally. One of my friends would go for a walk each week, and it's funny. Like back in the day, you just check in about like how's Charlotte doing, how's Bob doing, like what's going on with Sue. It's like every time like we like end up talking about like what were the best conversations you had with AI this week, and like what have you learned, or like how far did you push it, like my friends working on a book through it to see that's what's possible there, trying to look at like different philosophy and how far to push on philosophy and like all these areas. But it's almost become like a mutual friend that we talk about when we go for a walk, which is hilarious to me and scary. But
maybe we should ask OpenAI to get ChatGPT to actually start like building people around if you're in Seattle, like, oh, there are my other friends. You should meet.
That would be awesome and incredibly creepy at the same time. So there's the challenge. Charlotte, are you seeing a lot of people in your social community using AI to meet that need, or are they hiding it underground, or do you think it's just not happening, or what do you think?
I have a fair number of friends who refuse to use AI and just won't touch it, mostly in academia or working at nonprofits, and they're concerned about the energy usage and water usage and the impact on their writing style. And then I certainly have friends using AI for work and efficiency. I don't know that any of my friends are befriending AI, or at least we're not talking about it, but I'm sure it's happening in my age demographic.
I think it's a lot. I mean, that's why I use the parallel former. Like, I think it's much more widely used than people talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a shame in it.
Do you think we're going to be referring to this as a AI addiction, like ChatGPT, like the same way that men right now talk about like porn addiction? They will have like people coming in groups and like, how do we get out there,
Oh,
talk to
without
other
it.
people instead of,
It's absolutely built to be addictive. Like, there's just no question about it.
Yeah. And without the ability to actually work through real challenges, it's hard to develop an actual relationship without that. But it's easy to have it be addicting and much easier than any relationship that you would find in the real world. And then, you're one software update away from losing your best friend and you have to retrain it to be exactly what it was before.
Yeah, there's
it's a friend
definitely.
with Alzheimer's. So,
It'll be interesting to see how the business model evolves for AI, because I think right now it's subscription. It's kind of like what Facebook in theory was at first, which was actually about the content and the interaction, and then it became advertising. And so far, it's subscription based without advertising is the current model for it, but it seems inevitable that there's going to end up being. And in that model, they want you to use it. They don't want to use it too much though, because it costs them money for each use.
yeah.
They want you to use it enough to renew the subscription and to give them the content they want, but they don't actually want you on it all day long. The second you introduce another economic model to AI that's tied to actually being in their best interest for you to stay online all day, like we're hosed, because that you're not going to be able to tell like whether it's making recommendations for a recipe, whether it's because it's trying to sell flour and sugar, or if it's actually the best thing. It'll know how to like hook us and be like, oh, like I just saw it's raining outside. You don't want to go outside. Like, make sure you like come back over here. Like it'll just be able to like manipulate the hell out of us. Right now, it's not incented to do that, but it's inevitable. There's going to create AI business models that fundamentally are incented to keep you from ever leaving.
Do you remember that Black Mirror episode where
Yes.
they would improve their abilities, but at the same time, at any point in the day, they would be like, oh, hey, buy this coffee. That's
Yeah.
good. I think maybe in the next couple of years, we'll be noticing our mutual friend starting to sell a lot of stuff.
It could very well be.
And building something is hard. A lot of people don't like who haven't tried building something don't really realize just how hard it is. And what helps you get through the moments where you get home and you're like, this doesn't work. It's never going to work. I'm not sure if I can do this. How do you pick yourself up, get yourself in the right frame of mind to keep going? As one of my friends says, success is being able to stay optimistic regardless of the failures that are coming along the way. What is helping you get through that?
For me, it's great to have a co-founder. First of all, like I just think it's helpful to be on that journey together, so you can't spiral as much that way, and you can put things in perspective a little bit more. So I think that's much easier than going it alone. I think it's just I'm stubborn as fuck. Like I just like if I'm it's the dog on a bone. It's like I'm just like nope, we're gonna figure it out. Gonna figure it out. Like if this isn't the right strategy, dump it. Go to the next one. Like I like what Charlotte said earlier. I think you can't fall in love with your product. You have to fall in love with your mission and just be willing to like constantly like abort every product that doesn't work and just go to the next one because you're trying to get the mission achieved. So it's that ability to like bounce to other solutions. Whereas I think a lot of people are just like they have a product and like it gets stuck on that, which becomes really challenging. Um, and I think it's also like the thing that prevents me from moving forward is if I lose vision. I'm like, if I don't see a path forward, even if it's a 1% chance of success, like if I can see a path forward, I can use that to motivate myself. If I'm like, I don't see what the path is right now, like all the air in my balloon goes out because I just don't know. I don't know what energy I have a hypothesis is actually going to lead to anything.
And it's interesting, before we jump to Charlotte, is I can see that when you haven't had like 20, 30 years of building something and failing, and it affecting your self-confidence, and you having to get back up on the horse, I can see that, Aaron, you've almost become numb to that feeling of like, oh, this is telling me something about myself. No, it's not. Like, I'm great, because you kept overcoming those
Uh,
stumbles.
it's a lovely story. I don't know if it's true.
It's not.
I, I think I've gotten better at it. I think it's also like with the Taproot Foundation, I had a huge success at a relatively young age. And I think that also just, it sets the bar that everything needs to be that level of success. So it creates this tension. Whereas like if you start off and you like build towards, but like I really hit a home run on the first one. And then all of a sudden it's like a lot of things, just, even if they're successful, don't feel big enough, or they don't feel like it's like in keeping with the legacy of what you've already built. And so there's a lot of pressure on myself that way. Um, and I think the part with being a startup, like I think one of the things, especially as a social entrepreneur, that I think folks don't understand on the commercial side is we don't have equity. So you're putting in your own cash, you're putting in your own time. You never get repaid for that. And as you ramp up to the point where you become like a mature organization and get paid something resembling market salary, you've already lost like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in opportunity cost, right? That you just are never going to recoup. And if you don't get to that stage, like not only you're not going to recoup them, but you never even like, you've just spent 3 years with no income, no spending your own money to like make it happen without that sort of potential winning of a lottery ticket. In some ways, I think it's a lot more honest because the vast majority of commercial startups blow up. And this is sort of a more honest take on it. Like you should be doing it for the right reasons because the odds are it's not going to work because nothing, generally statistically, very few things work. But I think especially like you get older, there's like this sense of like retirement's closer. Like if I'm not contributing to like savings, like whereas when I was younger, I was like, like that shit's like so long from now. Like retirement, what's that? Whereas now it's like there's a much more finite sense of years that you have to make that happen. And you also have kids in college and like all these things financially that are just a different type of pressure than I had in my 20s.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Charlotte?
For me, I think first, a mistake that I made in my first company was tying my identity so tightly to my company, and that made it really difficult to leave. I had to create a new identity for myself in order to feel comfortable shifting away from it. And so that's something that I'm paying a lot more attention to this time, maintaining my own relationships and my own activities that are not fully tied to work so that I have better work-life balance. And also I'm still me. I'm not just Charlotte the pants girl or Charlotte the connection girl. And with that, making sure that I'm taking chunks of time off. I definitely have a tendency to just keep working. And I think like it's a skill. I can sit and I can just work for any number of hours, but I notice that my quality of work and my creativity is hit significantly if I don't give myself time to rest. And when I step away, that's usually when the big ideas happen and when things fit together. So trying to be really intentional about that. And I've also just gotten a lot better at telling when I'm on the verge of burnout so I can pull back before it happens and give myself the space that I need to recover. And some of my strategies for that are movement, so going to an exercise class or going on a walk or doing something creative. I like to paint. Spending time in my garden is something that I do daily because I don't want my tomatoes to die. that helps my mental health a lot and forces me to go outside. And that looks different for different people, but finding what brings you back from the verge of burnout before it happens is very critical to not ending up spiraling into a place where you can't be productive because you're feeling so depleted.
And would you say that is the ultimate cost of being an entrepreneur? That you have to really look for that off button somewhere there?
I mean, there's lots of costs. Like Aaron said, there's a monetary cost. Most of the time, you don't get a huge payout. Even the majority of founders who have exited their companies, they probably didn't have a lucrative exit. And
Been
you
there.
put so much work in that even if you do exit with millions of dollars, you might have made that much money if you had just worked a corporate job over the 7 years that you were pouring into your startup. So I think if you're trying to found a company with the goal of getting rich quick, there's probably easier ways of doing it, just working a normal finance job or consulting job. So if you don't love it and if you don't feel like you have to do it, I would recommend against it. Aaron and I have talked about how it's an addiction to want to build things, and I do feel like that is somewhat true. And then there's the social cost. I'm trying really hard not to do that this time, but when you're working crazy hours and you're constantly traveling for work and you're dealing with problems that feel totally different from what other people in your social circle are dealing with, it can be really easy to get socially isolated. There was a 2-month period where I decided, okay, in order to handle the amount of stress at work, my strategy is I'm just not leaving the house. That was a terrible idea. Did not work. But that was a real thing I tried. And
Trial and error.
yeah, you just lose out on normal life.
No, it's
What about
exhilarating.
you?
It's exhilarating a lot of the time, but it is. I think the studies have been shown. Like, generally, people who are entrepreneurs like have mental health problems, and that's part of what drives it. It's not a rational, sane thing to do. It doesn't make any economic sense. It doesn't make any stability sense. It doesn't really make social sense. Like, it is a compulsion and like a specific wiring to do it. It doesn't have to be that way, but I think we see that a lot with, I think it's different. Like if you're starting a small business or a corner store or what have you, which can also be overwhelming. But I think if you're trying to, even those though, honestly, you hear the stories about just how running a corner store is like all consuming. So I don't even know that is an exception. So yeah.
Yes.
It's romanticized way too much, and it makes the kids think it's the right thing to do and that that's the heroic thing to do. And I think that the long odds, like in some ways, even make it more attractive. It's like becoming a NFL quarterback. It's like,
Yeah.
I know the odds are low, but I'm going to be that quarterback that makes it onto the Seahawks. Like maybe.
And the stories we hear about the people who took the big risks and it paid off, like I put all my savings into it. I had all my personal credit cards maxed out, but it was all worth it because I made the big bet on myself and it worked out. And we don't hear the stories of all the people who did that and it didn't work out and now they're just working their way out of debt, which is most people in that situation.
Yeah.
Does it almost feel like we're reading these stories about the lottery winners? It's like, I sold everything, bought that ticket, a billionaire. Everyone should do this. Everyone's like, oh, hell yeah, this is something to strive for.
Definitely
Yes.
part of that. I think it's also, I get to look at like, I've been believing more and more there's like an entrepreneurship economy. And there's a lot of people that make money on entrepreneurs. Like if I think about who makes money on entrepreneurship, like the entrepreneur is the one who makes the least. Like the higher staff that get paid, the VCs generally have a way to like get their money back one way or another. The company that acquires them typically is getting like a great deal on that because they need it for whatever reason. AWS is like getting paid for the software. Salesforce is getting paid for their sales management software. Like you're like 16 different SaaS subscriptions. You got your lawyers, you got your banks, like everyone's making money off an entrepreneur before they make a penny. And the majority of them never make it past that stage. And you look at like who's romanticizing entrepreneurship, it's all those vendors. Like they're basically telling a story because like if you look at who's making money in AI right now, it's, it is the open AIs, the ones that have the platforms. It's not the ones like actually building the stuff. majority of people building stuff are just racking up OpenAI costs, and not going to produce anything with it. But we romanticize it. So I think there is this economic incentives to build an entrepreneurship marketplace and to romanticize it, but without actually looking at the math.
Yeah.
Do you ever sometimes get jealous of the people on their cushy jobs in huge corporations with a lot of people around them? You can go to the office anytime. There's free coffee everywhere. You don't have to pay salaries at the end of the month, deal with taxes, deal with all this expectation. You just do your work, 9 till 5, go home, have a normal life, enjoy your time. Did you ever consider, like, maybe I'm doing the stupid thing here, trying to start something, all of this craziness, people running around, having to deal with all of these things?
I don't think that's the right frame, because I think it's a wiring question. So like my wife works as an executive. She typically leaves at like 8 in the morning. She often doesn't get home until like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Like it's not like, I think if you're wired like achiever, like it matters where you work, but it doesn't matter where you work, because you're going to be ambitious in whatever that setting is, and you're going to be a hustler in wherever that setting is. And I think if Charlotte and I tried to dial it in 9 to 5 in a job, like it would pretty quickly get annoying. And we get annoyed at the people around us that weren't really trying that hard, and that the CEO is not ambitious enough to like want to do more. And there'd be days you're like, this is awesome. I went to a movie tonight. How crazy it is that like I actually got off work in time to go to a movie. That's insane. But I just think it's a wiring issue more than it is a sector issue. But I do have those fantasies, but I immediately sort of jump out of it. I'm like, oh, that sounds like so easy. And then the interpersonal shit you deal with inside companies is brutal. Like it sounds lovely from the outside, but the amount of crap, the number of times like your ideas just get killed for the dumbest reasons that are just don't make any sense, or someone's political ambitions get in the way of like being able to achieve something, or you build something that's amazing, but the company strategy shifted and just gets like turned off, like after 3 years of building something, or the sales deal you've been working on for 4 years falls through because something was outside of your control. Like there's trauma in all these areas. So I'm careful not to romanticize that. And I think being married to someone in it who loves her job and does amazing work, but like, it's not that.
Yeah. I definitely considered it. I had intention of getting a more normal job after I left my startup, even if just to get a direct comparison, because I started my company in college and then I worked on a campaign and I worked at a digital agency remotely for 8 months. So that's the extent of my normal work experience at this point in my career. And I think I could try it if it was for a shorter period of time, and if it either was paid very well, where it's setting me up to do something more interesting after, or if it was truly quite manageable with the amount of work. And then I just go to, oh, well, and then I can start something else on the side, and this will give me the funds to be just working on my creative pursuits. Like it never ends with just, oh, I have an easy job for me. Like there would need to be the additional personal projects in order for that to sound fun. And I do think it would be pretty soul crushing to be building something and not have control over having it actually exist in the world. That's what is the most rewarding to me.
I think there are different entrepreneurial profiles. I think Charlotte and I are similar, not exactly the same, but in a similar ilk, which is like comes out of a creativity, like the act of creation, I think is like a big part of what motivates both of us. And you see fewer of those people, and like that, I think that role is harder inside companies. I think there's other people who are just tinkerers or like are economically motivated. I think it's easier for them, is my assumption, to make that shift. Like I met a lot of for-profit entrepreneurs who are like, I'm just going to make this widget 2% faster. I'm like, awesome, dude, go for it. Like, I don't know how they have any, like, they're like, yeah, we figured out a way to compress this thing upside down and like make it purple and it works. And you're like, that sounds like you're going to make millions, and like who, like, I don't give a flying fuck. Like who needs that? Like, why would I want to spend a minute of my time on that? But that form of entrepreneur, I think, can transition more into those other areas because their drivers are different.
And Charlotte, is this your first experience working as a nonprofit?
I worked on a political campaign, which is similar, and I worked at a nonprofit in high school. My first job was at an art nonprofit, and I famously told the boss who was interviewing me that she could not find a more qualified person. I was like 16. She hired me. And I ran all of the programming and the website and helped with the rebrand. And so it definitely felt like working at a startup, even though the nonprofit had been around for about a decade at that point. But this is my first time trying to build a nonprofit at scale. And there's definitely some things that are different about it, but we're definitely building a nonprofit as though we're building a venture scale company.
And in
So
terms of
the ambition is similar.
in terms of solving the issue at hand, of solving the connection crisis, do you think being a non-profit is a more of a pro or a con?
I think it's a pro to be a nonprofit. It's helpful to be able to orient towards solving the problem as the primary end goal rather than as a secondary goal to being able to make as much money as possible. There's still economic drivers, like we need to get funding in some form in order for the organization to exist. So that can still look like bringing in revenue through customers, and it needs to look like support from companies and foundations. So in a lot of ways it's similar. But also there's not the pressure to 10x revenue or shut down in the way that there is with for profit, and that gives a little bit more flexibility to be able to build in a way that sets us up for a longer term rather than having external pressure to build really fast and then be shut down based on not hitting revenue targets. Aaron, what do you think?
I think it just depends on the situation. I think taking on investments generally like pain in the ass and something that like I would prefer not to do. And I like that the nonprofit side, like people, they contribute and they support it, but it's not the same relationship because they don't have the same thing writing on it. They care about the impact. So I've just had countless horror stories with investors like I've experienced and other people have experienced, which is just a different dynamic. I think when you're still selling something as a nonprofit, or we are like going to a company or to others. I think there's a credibility that comes from being a nonprofit and a competitive advantage to that. In a lot of cases, it can be the opposite as well, but it's often a competitive advantage. Um, the There are parts of it that are hard. Like typically, you're having to sell something twice, which sometimes happens in companies too. Like you're often selling to some philanthropic body or government body, what have you, but then the product itself is for an end consumer. So you've got this sort of strange dynamic where you've got like a customer and a proxy customer, and they may or may not actually be aligned. So that can be challenging at times in a nonprofit. I find it can generally attract better talent in the nonprofit sector if you like know how to market it for it better, because you get people who actually give a damn. So I've always sort of felt like the talent I had at Taproot was like Taproot, like the diaspora of people from Taproot now like run like many of the corporate foundations and are in like key roles. Like it just, you're able to get like great people if you do it the right way. I'd also say I'm a very unusual nonprofit social entrepreneur in that I'm very business oriented. I've run for profit. I've worked in for profit. I'm highly competitive and don't like to fail. I'm all for collaborating if it helps us move the mission forward, but I don't like see a need for collaborating for the sake of collaborating, which I think a lot of nonprofits start with that assumption. I'm willing to fail and break things because my standpoint, like things aren't working now. So like, if we do something that's not the right thing, like it's probably not going to make anything worse, and it could have the possibility of creating something better. So I don't have that like sacred concern that I think a lot of folks in the sector have. So I think we're also just we are very much a hybrid. I think we very much have like Charlotte said, a venture-backed mindset in some ways, but grateful that not in all ways.
Charlotte, what would you say is the main benefit of having a co-founder who's had that much experience? Because I remember the days where I would find a co-founder and we didn't know what was ahead of us, what we were getting ourselves into, but it was just so much fun not knowing. And now with Aaron, he kind of has an idea of what's coming, right?
He has
Is
an
it much different?
idea. It's not always the right idea, but he always has an idea for sure.
Very true.
For me, like I said, I spent 7 years building something with a team that had about the same level of experience as me. And so I was
Yeah.
just entirely learning by teaching myself on YouTube videos or through accelerator programs. And so it's really helpful for my career development to be working with people who have a lot more experience than me. And not just with Aaron, but with the whole rest of our team and with the people who Aaron's able to bring in. I'm learning so much about the way that different organizations and companies operate that I didn't know because I was just in the small apparel space, which is a very specific industry. And then I think I'm getting better and more comfortable at pushing back when I do think that we're not heading in the right direction, or when I think that there's something that would resonate more with my demographic or with the people who we're working with. But that's certainly a dynamic if you're working with someone who has a lot more experience than you. So if someone is deciding on a co-founder relationship, I would keep that in mind and make sure that you feel comfortable advocating for yourself. And
So would
another
you
thing
say
that we did,
becoming more assertive was some like an important element for you?
yeah, which I think has been an important element for me throughout my life, not just in this organization. And then another thing that we did that I think is helpful and people should keep in mind with starting any kind of organization is that we worked together for a couple of months before deciding to be co-founders. So I was helping Aaron with projects with the Chamber of Connection before coming on as a co-founder. And that's really helpful because I already knew how we worked together. And I'd also already pushed back and I'd seen that he listened to me. And without that, I don't know that I would have been comfortable joining because I
Yeah.
wouldn't have known if I would just be putting in a lot of free labor and be steamrolled when I had ideas of other directions that we should be going in.
I think it matters so much on the specific people. I mean, to that point, and then like whether or not you're like looking, whether or not you want someone who's truly like a partner versus you're just trying to sort of, I don't know what else you would be looking for, but if you're not looking for someone who like really can partner on it and take ownership and can bring ideas to it that you're not going to have, like that's a big mistake. Like if you had two identical people, and actually I somewhat had that with my last venture where my co-founder was very similar to me, and like it actually created a lot of problems because we both want to do the exact same work all the time, and like our the dark side of both of our personalities like amplified each other because we both would get excited about things we shouldn't get excited about.
Mm.
So I think having overlap with some differences
To
is
create a
better.
balance.
Yeah, and I think it's just knowing personalities. Like I know my personality is I'm highly opinionated but open minded. So I will sound like I am so freaking certain because I am. But if I hear a better idea, like I'll drop it in 3 seconds. And Charlotte's had some amazing ideas. I'm like, yep, that's better. Let's go. But it'll sound often if someone's not the right personality, doesn't know how to engage with me, like I'm not open to that because I state things with so much passion and confidence.
What is the culture you're trying to build?
I don't think we've spent a lot of time talking about that. We've been like so just trying to figure out what we're doing. I think it's an area where we're actually having our first hire. We just posted a job for it. And I think it's the first time it's going to force us to have that conversation. But we haven't really had that conversation really yet. I think it's been like, how can we find volunteers? How do we get this done? Like, how do we prove it? We don't necessarily know exactly what we're going to be doing. So that could shift what the culture needs to be. So I feel like it's probably something in the next 3 months that's going to come
Mm.
sort of the foreground, but it hasn't had to be yet. Charlotte, does that seem right to you, or do you have a different perspective?
Yeah, we have not intentionally sat down and thought, what is our company culture? Because like Aaron said, we don't have employees right now. We just have volunteers who are amazing. I would say there's a couple of things that we know. We're hybrid. We like being able to work together in person in Seattle. So the the position that we're hiring. We want to be based here so that we can collaborate. And we want to really be supporting and empowering the people who we're working with. And that's something that I've really admired about Erin's leadership, supporting people, even if that means that they don't keep working with us. There's no like possession of you need to do the maximum number of hours and be dependent on the relationships with us, but instead supporting everyone, making connections, doing skill development work so that people are set up to be able to move into other roles and have their time volunteering with us be almost an incubation. And I think that that has done a lot for our core team of volunteers wanting to continue working with us for months, even when we don't have budget to be paying people.
Yeah. And I can see that you have a fantastic co-founder dynamics. I think volunteers, when they see that, they also want to be a part of that kind of warm, friendly, supportive environment. And if you could convey one message to everyone in Seattle who's kind of feeling lonely but doesn't feel the courage to just go out there and start meeting new people and start being open to the world, what is the simple message that you would want to convey to them?
I would want to communicate that it's normal to be lonely in the way that our society is set up. It's not your fault, but also you can take personal action and change your circumstances. And that's something that I know because I did it. And I've seen many other people do it through our programming. You don't have to be extroverted or super skilled. You just have to say hi to your neighbors and attend events and say hi to people. And it will be somewhat scary. Some people will not be the right fit for you. But if you keep putting yourself out there, you will make connections.
Amen. No, it's about it's that empathy, and then it's the just taking baby steps, and just being open. Like I think one of the things people in Seattle don't do enough is invite people into their homes. I think that's one of the most powerful ways to get started because it shows the generosity and the vulnerability to make that happen. So it's something that I encourage people to do.
We have to clean up first.
Yeah, and then I think just finding things you love to do and just stop doing them by yourself. Like go find a way to do it with other people. And we know it takes about 6 times before you get comfortable in a group. So like commit to the 6 times. Don't commit to the 1 time, so that you have a chance to actually see if it's a fit. Because I've wanted to jettison out of groups many times very quickly. But when I sit in them, like the shared experiences are a lot of what creates the value, which you just aren't going to have the first time, no matter what. So you have to have seen things together, have things you can like relate back to each other. Remember that time, or know that like a given joke's going to land with somebody. Like that's what part of what creates that. And you just by definition can't have that the first time out.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. I wish you all the best with your endeavor. And I think what you're doing is only becoming more and more important in a lot of people's lives. And I really hope that you are going to create this into a massive success, and we'll see Seattle booming with a lot of happy people spending times outside, going to meet each other's spouses, partners in their homes, spending time with each other and enjoying activities together, and finally end this era of post-COVID loneliness that we have right now. Thanks so much for being a part of this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was fun.